time of year where actual football activities are going on over at One Bills Drive. A lot of new faces and a lot of faces in attendance as the first round of organized team activities kicked off earlier in the week. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast, everyone.
And I am Andy Young. Josh Allen, the birthday boy, celebrating his 28th birthday on the practice field at OTAs on Tuesday. And I kind of liken it to a kindergarten birthday party because he has a whole bunch of new friends invited to the show.
Well put, Andy. I've never seen someone's birthday so celebrated in my life that I did yesterday, but that's the world we live in now. Our special guest today, Alex Brasky, sports editor of the Batavia Daily News and Bills Digest. Alex, thanks for joining us. You and Andy both at attendance for the media availability on Tuesday. Get that first look at Josh Allen and his relationship with some of the new players. Alex, let's just jump right in it. From your point of view, what did you see? What's your big takeaway, the overall picture from this first availability of OTAs and what you got to see?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I should say, just did my own podcast last night. But thank you for having me. Exciting times in the Bills media scape, covering OTAs and mini camp along the docket as well, and training camp coming up. But yesterday at OTAs, I think the overarching really takeaway was it's going to take a long time to sort out this wide receiver room. You have the rookie Keon Coleman. Everyone's been focused on him, but there's so many other new faces to sort out. You saw Chase Claypool flash yesterday with a big play, kind of went up and mossed Jamarcus Ingram on a catch near the sideline, showing that great leaping ability, that above the rim ability that the Bills have been so desperate to gain this offseason with some of their signings of 6'4" and above wide receivers. Another of them, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, spoke with the media after practice, and he seems to already be ingratiating himself in that locker room. Had no problem interrupting Josh Allen during his press availability, wishing him the happy birthday and discussing how he and Allen kind of bonded at Allen's house before MVS signed with the team. You have Curtis Samuel, also another player that really stood out to me yesterday on the practice field, Mac Hollins. So a lot to sort out there in the wide receiver room. It's really all going to start with Keon Coleman, that second-round pick, but there's so many other names that are going to have to determine their roles over the next few weeks and months.
Yeah, Andy and I were talking about that before the podcast got underway, that you could literally spend the entire podcast just talking about the new wide receivers there and what needs to happen for them to all gel, Andy, before the season gets underway. We know there's a lot to happen between now and week one of the NFL season, but there's also a lot that needs to happen. Your takeaways from what you first saw, because we talked about what you were looking for on that first day of OTAs. Did you like what you were looking for?
Yeah, you know what? Keon Coleman, who was obviously the star of the show through the draft process into rookie minicamp, we wanted to see how is his connection going to form with Josh Allen. And I think he did show a couple of flash plays out there, some nice catches along the sidelines, looked to have a nice, decent rapport with Allen. Josh said that he's a big guy who can jump, he can run some decent routes, and he can get out there and make plays. That's a guy that's a different type of receiver than they've had over the last few years. And that is a group of guys, as Alex mentioned, 6'4" and above. You have a whole host of characters. You look at the wide receiver group, and you've got some shorter guys, Andy Isabella, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. They're not huge guys. They're all under 6 foot. And then you have these giants, 4 or 5 of them, right? You're talking Shorter, Shavers, MVS, all these guys, Keon Coleman. It's really incredible. So Josh said that it's going to take some time to develop the rapport with these guys because he just doesn't have the reps with them, and he's got to get it moving in a hurry. And I think that's the challenge that he embraces. Alex, I want to go back to you because you brought up a good point on social media, on X last night, I believe, that you really liked Mac Hollins, and you think that he is probably a lock in the top 4 or 5 receivers to make this roster.
Yeah, I posted on X, it was a little while after practice, and I kind of prefaced it with, it was a way too early, not so hot take I think a lot of people that are focused on this team have Mac Hollins as someone who's pretty much a roster lock at this point. But I think after that signing early in the free agency period, I think a lot of people forgot about Mac Hollins, and then you get exciting names like Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Chase Claypool, two players who have obviously much higher of a ceiling on the offensive side of the ball than Hollins has. So that caused people to forget about the signing of Hollins, but by no means have the Bills forgotten about him and what potential impact that he could bring. You saw him on the practice field yesterday, and I described it on our podcast at the Daily News right here, right now with my co-host AJ Sobolski. He seems like an alpha male in that wide receiver room, and in a room that is in need of that alpha male now with Stephon Diggs having departed for Houston. And I'm not saying he's the same personality as Stephon Diggs. He's not going to be the same player as Stephon Diggs in terms of production offensively. But his vibe and his energy and his control over that drill group yesterday really stood out on the practice field. Just his energy, as I said, the amount of talking he was doing with everybody, just how vocal he was, and just his comfortability, it seems, already with a new team. And then you bring in that special teams ability that he has. The Bills lost so much on special teams from a season ago, and we know how much they that they value, special teams. And with the new kick return rules and such, I think Mac Hollins certainly a lock to make this 53-man roster.
And I think people forget, too, how much Gabe Davis was used as a blocker in the run game. He was on the field 90% of the time. Mac Hollins is a guy who I think is a decent blocker and probably comes in as one of the better blockers in the wide receiver room. So there's going to be a role there. And I think you're going to see more specialized play from the Bills wide receivers because they can mix and match guys. They can use Mac Hollins in the run game. And no, you don't want it to be completely obvious to other teams that Mac Hollins is only on the field for run plays, right? Yeah. But as Keon Coleman comes along in that X-receiver role, as some of these other guys who they've brought in come along and get ingratiated, Mac Hollins is a guy I think they probably are going to count on. And I agree with you, Alex. I think he's probably a lock to make the roster given that ability, his veteran leadership, and special teams as well.
So we're starting right here to put together this wide receiver group as we slowly go along here. I want to ask you, Alex, about Chase Claypool. We hear Sean McDermott saying, I think before practice, that in a nutshell, he's got a lot to prove to get his career back on track to where it was. And then Claypool also talking with the media after practice. Takeaways from Claypool now on the roster, where you think he slots with everyone else there, and if you can get that Chase Claypool that everyone thinks you can get, if it's there, how much that benefits this Bills' new receiver group moving forward.
Yeah, if year one, year two Chase Claypool surfaces, or resurfaces, I should say, in Buffalo, that's going to be a boon for the Bills. There's no question about it. That's what they were looking for when they signed him. And I know there's been a lot said about his personality and maybe the problems that he may have caused or been a part of in his previous stops. And although one interaction doesn't tell the story of a human being or a player, but speaking with him yesterday after practice, he seemed like a very humble guy, a guy who understands his position in the pecking order now at this point of his career. Maybe a former star, but now somebody who's trying to reclaim that stardom and trying to bring himself off the scrap heap where the Bills found him this offseason. And I think he's in a perfect place to do that. I think the Bills are willing to give players second chances, and I think they've built a culture that allows a player to come into their own within this system. So I think he's in the perfect place, and you heard Sean McDermott speak about him before practice yesterday as well, just really glowing about how he viewed Claypool in kind of that reclamation mindset. So if that's the mindset they're getting, and the player that we saw in that one play with Ingram when he went up and caught it over him, if those two things mesh together, and he can also gain that rapport with Josh Allen, boy, that would be a boon for the Bills. That would be something that they've been looking for the past several seasons. Gabe Davis provided it in flashes, but never consistently enough.
And he will go to MVS here. Another new guy, another name everyone was familiar with when You heard the Bills were signing him. He's a guy who's won championships, but also a guy who's had the drops at times. But if you're a Bills fan, you know he had that big catch in the AFC divisional round for the Chiefs, and he's been around Patrick Mahomes. He gets here, it seems like he's thrilled beyond anything to be able to play now with Josh Allen.
Yeah, it's funny. He joked that he said, hopefully I can bring more good things over here because he's been with Aaron Rodgers, who won MVPs. He's been with Patrick Mahomes, who's won MVPs and Super Bowls. And he said, hopefully this year we can get Josh Allen both of those things. MVS is an interesting character. I like the way he presented himself. He felt very comfortable talking with everyone at One Bills Drive. And he's got an interesting role ahead of him with the Bills. I think he's a lock to make the roster. They invested a pretty sizable chunk in getting him here. It's not massive, but it's something, right? It's not the veteran minimum.
Right.
So I think he's in your top 4 to 5 receivers, and I think he can have a big-time role because he's a guy that can take the top off the defense. He's a downfield specialist, which is something they really have not had in recent years. Yeah, he's had issues with drops, especially during the regular season. He only catches about 50% of the balls that get thrown his way over the course of his career, but he's also mainly running go routes, and those are harder to come down with.
Yeah.
He's not a big contested catch guy, but in the playoffs, he's made big plays time and time again. I think the Bills are hoping with Josh Allen at quarterback, another strong quarterback that he's had in his career, they can just kind of continue that. He can be another vertical threat for that passing game, especially when teams are playing that too high safety shell against them.
And Alex, it seems like you went from so many questions with Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs gone. Who are these weapons going to be? When you look at this receiver group as a whole, some of these guys coming in, now you have Josh Allen throwing to you. Is this wide receiver group, at first sight, when you first looked at them during OTAs, does Josh Allen need to do stuff to make them better? Or is this receiver group right now just, when you look at it, maybe even better than what Josh Allen has had before, and maybe he doesn't have to make everyone better? Maybe it's just a better group of pass catchers.
I think you bring up a good point. It certainly could be more diverse, and there's certainly more options at his disposal, at least at this time in OTAs. It remains to be seen who they'll keep, if Claypool will stick around. And I brought it up last night in the pod. Maybe this is the year that they keep 7 wide receivers with all the help that they need on special teams and with Mac Hollins' ability. And then you have a KJ Hamler, a guy that they brought in, a speed guy. Maybe he factors in on special teams as well. So maybe this is the year they keep 7 wide receivers. I know that they usually fall on 6, but that's also a question to consider. But no, I think the diversity within this Bills wide receiver room has certainly been upped from a season ago, but the star power has kind of dissipated. You don't have the Stephon Diggs. You don't have the quote-unquote sure thing in this wide receiver room anymore. I know Diggs kind of tapered off toward the end of last season, but over the course of his career with the Bills, he was just phenomenal. 1,000-yard seasons, time after time, just the quick chemistry that he built with Josh Allen. It did seem to dissipate toward the end, but you don't have that number one target, and when you have a franchise quarterback, it's really, I wouldn't say it's a necessity to have that number one wide receiver, but it certainly is a plus to have somebody that he has that ultimate connection to or with, and somebody that he can go to at any time. But at the same time, if they can get these guys going and Joe Brady can really roll out the stable of horses that they have and push all the right buttons, the sky or the ceiling could be a bit higher for this group. I'm just not so sure you're going to see one of them kind of elevate into that role that we saw Stephon Diggs assume over the past several seasons. I think a better candidate for that might be Dalton Kincaid.
Okay, we'll get to Kincaid a bit. I tend to get scatterbrained while we're talking here. I want to bring up Khalil Shakir because this time last year...
It's early, Kevin. For me, it's still early. 10:24. I'm a night cat.
I report to work at 3 a.m, so I'm on the opposite end of this.
You're the guy who used to stay up till like 4 a.m. when you work the night shift, anchor the late shows, stay up late.
Now my work day's almost done.
You're completely flip-flopped, and I don't think it's done well for your brain.
Well, at any rate, we won't say anything because our bosses could be listening, Andy, but Khalil Shakir, this time last year there was talk if he would even make the roster heading into training camp. Now he's a fan favorite. He seems like he's one of Josh Allen's favorites. I know you can't get into detail, Andy, but when you come back from OTAs and say Khalil Shakir got smoked in practice,
He did.
I don't think fans want to hear that. I know you really can't get into it, but I think a lot's expected from Shakir. I don't think it's wise to put a beat down on what might be a go-to target.
Yeah, we can talk about the play that happened. Shakir caught a ball over the middle, great ball from Josh Allen, and he got absolutely lit up by Taylor Rapp. Taylor Rapp crushed him, and he went down hard. And you're not supposed to have contact in these practices like that. So Rapp went off the field, Shakir went off the field. You don't want to see that at this point in the season. I don't think the Bills were probably too pleased to see that, but they'll move on, and it'll be all right. Shakir is obviously going to be a huge factor, and I almost wondered, and Alex, I might want to get your thoughts on this too, if Shakir could slide into more than just being a slot receiver, and they use him a little bit more on the outside because they have Samuel, because they have Kincaid on the inside. I could see some versatility in his game, and maybe it's something that could expand.
Yeah, and let me pose this question to you. If I put you on the spot right now, I was listening to the Shout podcast with my guy Matt Perino, who I believe you had on, and Ryan
good buddy of
Talbot.
ours. Yep.
He posed the question to Ryan, how many receivers on the Bills roster caught passes from Josh Allen last year?
Was it 2, maybe?
2. Who's the other one besides Shakir?
Isabella?
Andy Isabella.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah.
Andy Isabella caught a ball last year?
He was active and he caught a ball.
Oh, okay.
So if you're looking at it from that perspective, if you're going to have somebody that you're comfortable moving around and putting in different positions with Josh Allen, and with that chemistry already having been previously built, it's got to be Shakir. He's the only holdover from last year. You saw him break out within the offense alongside, albeit, Stephon Diggs and number 2, Gabe Davis, when he actually showed up in the games. But, yeah, I think Shakir is in for an even more breakout season. I think a lot of people around the league are calling for it. And just that rapport that he previously has with Josh Allen is going to be ever so valuable this year. With Curtis Samuel coming in, with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, you have Chase Claypool, and then a second year with Dalton Kincaid. So I think the key to this offense is going to be Shakir and what he can provide, and then obviously Kincaid's consistency within the offensive system. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they use Shakir, more of an inside player with his size, but I think they like his ability to maybe be a bit more versatile and maybe spread his wings this year under Joe Brady.
Let's dive into Dalton Kincaid, because here we go into week 2, and that was something, as a guy on the outside, not at practice yesterday, a lot of positive things as he gets ready for season number 2. And yeah, it's OTAs, it's one day, it's shorts and a helmet, but we can start with you, Andy, then we'll go to Alex. Initial thoughts, does it look like he's taking the next step?
I would have expected that without even seeing practice yesterday.
Okay.
I think Kincaid's in for a monster year based on how last season ended, the way they've kind of built and kind of reshaped, retooled the offense, and maybe changed the approach a little bit. Obviously, when you draft a tight end in the first round, you want to maximize that and get the most out of him. I think Kincaid really came on at the end of last season. We saw his depth of target get bigger. We saw his volume increase in terms of the number of targets. And then you see him in practice at OTAs, and he looked fantastic. Had a number of splash plays. Allen connected with him over the middle a couple of different times that I saw during 11-on-11 work. And I think he may lead the team in targets this season. I think that's very likely. It's a strong possibility, Alex.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I think over 100, maybe 120 targets for Kincaid might not be out of the realm of possibility. You saw it yesterday in practice. I mean, you didn't, like you said, you didn't need that to know the plans that they have in place for Kincaid, but I think he caught 3 or 4 balls during an hour and a half session, and a couple of them very impressive. One near the sideline where Allen put it up really only where Kincaid could get it, went up and hauled it in for a sizable gain. So Kincaid, impressive immediately to open these OTAs, and that's a good sign for the Bills, who have big plans for him. The question I have in that tight end room is where Dawson Knox is going to fit. Obviously a down year last year, but he's not too far removed from a productive season. If they can find a way to factor him in within the red zone, I think that could really help this team as well. Obviously, Keon Coleman, a lot has been said about his potential red zone ability, but don't discount Dawson Knox within this offense and what he could potentially provide as a complementary piece now to Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, Knox is interesting because he signed that big contract, and then they bring in another tight end who's a better pass catcher ahead of him. Dawson is certainly capable. He's never had an incredible, huge season like in the realm we're predicting for Kincaid coming up, but he's been a very good player and a part of some big plays and big games for the Bills.
And in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, Dawson Knox, you can say what you want about him dropping balls, but I think in the playoffs, he's pretty legit.
Jim Moore over here. Yeah, but he wasn't too happy in talking with him at the end of last season about what his role became.
Okay.
And he had an injury that he dealt with, but you could tell, and he even admitted it, that it was tough for him to just be kind of relegated to a blocking tight end. I think he thinks he's more than that, and he's shown he's capable of more than that. To Alex's point, if they can unlock both of those guys, that's tough on defenses.
So many options right there. Before we move on, Alex, any surprise sleeper then as far as pass catchers go for Josh Allen and the group of wide receivers and beyond that you see in this group of, because it seems on paper and where we stand now, there's so many options right now that it's going to be hard to even deal with it.
Yeah, I mentioned KJ Hamler earlier. He was my pre-OTAs sleeper pick within the wide receiver room, just due to what he presents. I think he presents a unique skill set. They went out and got a lot of these big guys, but he's kind of that smaller gadget guy that they were looking for in Deontay Hardy last year. Never really materialized his role within the offense. And Hamler can also do some work in the return game. I know they have a lot of guys that they might be looking for to work in that role as well. Maybe he's one of them. And maybe this is the year they keep 7 wide receivers in order to facilitate that. But also you have the Justin Shorter hive as deemed over the past several months and weeks and maybe even a year or so. But he looked okay at practice yesterday, moving around, catching a few balls and working out there in team drills. But I think he's got a long way to go to make this roster. I think in a perfect world, they'd like one of those veteran big guys to step through and really reclaim what they've shown previously with their other teams. I'm not so sure watching Shorter for an extended training camp last year, unless he's made significant improvements, which you can't put past a player, and we'll keep monitoring his development. But at this time, I would think that he's a quite of a long shot. I think a guy like Tyrell Shavers might have an easier route to the roster than a Justin Shorter. But if you were to ask me a dark horse candidate right now to make the roster at wide receiver, I'd put it at KJ Hamler.
Do you think that Shorter is a practice squad candidate? Do you think he would slip through there and go to the practice squad?
I know that if the Bills didn't keep him, that they'd love for him to do that, because he's certainly a player that has that football past and a lot of the measurables that you look for in a player. But he hasn't put it together since he's been in Buffalo, and I'm not sure that another team would be eager to pick a guy like that up that really hasn't shown anything. But like I said, with his physical traits and the once star-studded player that he was early in his collegiate career, maybe even before, I think teams will try to reignite that. But I think in a perfect world, the Bills would like to see him slip to the practice squad.
He'll end up on the Giants.
Joe Shane.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy. Come on down.
One thing that caught my attention listening to the Josh Allen press conference, and I didn't think of this, and then I started thinking of some of these big-time quarterbacks who went on to have great careers is how you're going to be the franchise quarterback. You're going to be on this team for a long time. But as far as rosters go, you're going to be on multiple different forms of that team. And I think when I look at it, and I go back to your Peyton Mannings, your Tom Brady's, and you look at the progression of where they were with what they had at the beginning of their career towards the end, and Josh Allen's in that mode right now where, you know, you go from Cole Beasley and John Brown, then you get Stephon Diggs here. Those are two different kind of offenses. And now with taller wide receivers, Andy, that can catch contested balls and whatnot downfield, maybe the third version of the Bills that we're looking at being formed right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Teams evolve over time, and the way teams have defended against the Bills, the way the Bills have had to manage and massage the salary cap. They really, people talk about going all in, putting all your chips on the table. They kind of did that the year of the Von Miller signing, and they continued it a little bit more and hedged the bet last season. They had to reset. The Chiefs did it recently. They came through and won Super Bowls since then, right? And the Chiefs kind of just keep throwing darts at the wall, hoping somebody sticks at the wide receiver position. Certainly helps when you have Andy Reid as your head coach and Travis Kelce as your de facto number one wide receiver. But, yeah, this is that next evolution for the Bills, and Allen's at a point in his career where I think he can and he has to be able to elevate younger players, different kinds of players, because they don't have Stephon Diggs anymore, that guy who's going to eat up 150, 160 targets every season and be reliable. They had to move on from him. It was time. He didn't want to be here anymore. The cap hit was huge. They're eating that money this year. I think they have the second most dead cap space in the NFL, but it's an evolution. We'll see if that plays out to their favor, that they have a bunch of diverse guys under Allen's wing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you also can't discount maybe the increase in the usage in the running game that's expected this season as well. I think that's something that we're going to see this year. It might not be it might be at the chagrin of Bills fans, but I certainly think you're going to see more of the running game this year. Not so much Josh Allen, but James Cook obviously came on a season ago. And then, Andy, I don't know what you saw yesterday, but boy, Ty Johnson, I know it's one OTA practice, but he was running like a bat out of hell yesterday whenever he caught the ball, running the ball. So I'm really excited to see what he has to offer. And then you also have Ray Davis, a multifaceted back as well that could help the passing game out of the backfield as well as the running game in short yardage.
I think that's the whole goal of this Bills offense and Joe Brady, as what we saw towards the end of last season when he's still running Dorsey's stuff, but we did see more of emphasis on the running game. We saw a lot of passes to the running backs. Cook is capable if he can hold on to the ball, right?
we saw him struggle to do that yesterday.
Yeah.
It was one of the first plays of Team Joel's. I think it was very, very early on, and Josh Allen hit him very close over the middle, and it was like that meme on X and Twitter with the car wash guy just fumbling all over himself. He just couldn't get a handle on it. I think maybe it was Taron Johnson who got a hand in, maybe to help force it out. But he did secure a good catch later in the practice. He caught a ball behind him over the middle. That was a nice grab. But he's got to become more consistent. We saw him drop, I think, 3 touchdown or potential touchdowns last year, and they seem to always come in pretty big spots too. Yeah. So James Cook certainly has to shore that part of his game up if he wants to really lock down that bell cow role for the Bills moving forward.
Yeah, I really like Ty Johnson. I liked what he showed at the end of last season when he got his shot. He was very consistent and made some big plays for them. At practice, you mentioned it, he had a nice catch. He's well-rounded in that game. And I think they're really high on Ray Davis. I mean, you're going to draft a guy, at that point in the draft, you continue to draft running backs. He's a guy who scored 21 touchdowns at Kentucky last season in the SEC, and 7 of those were through the passing game.
Different style back, too.
Yeah, so he's got a little more power, I think, too, to go with him, but he's good. He's good in the passing game as well, and he's got a great story, and that's been told before, but he's a guy I think they're high on as well. So there's just – it'll be interesting to see how this all melds together through training camp and then into the season, because it's just so different than what we've seen and expected over roughly the last 4 years.
I think this is the first time as we got a little cleanup to do as we move on with the podcast. Believe it or not, I guess we're kind of going to talk about defense here. But first of all, first time in a long time, attendance didn't seem like a big issue other than it was very good. You see down with the Houston Texans, Stephon Diggs did not show up.
But he never went to OTAs
No,
here.
no shocker there. But in the limited time we'll talk about the defense, Andy, go to Matt Milano, update on the linebackers status. Moving forward, obviously, Milano not out there.
Yeah, we did see him come out to practice after the portion of practice at OTAs that the media is allowed to take video of or photos. He was walking around, milling around with the linebackers and the defense. Sean McDermott said that he's on schedule in his recovery, but we probably won't see much of him on the field until training camp. But he's on schedule and he's moving along. Alex, I think that's just where you expected him to be. I don't think people really thought he was going to be out here going full go in OTAs. There's just no need for it.
No, I think that was a positive update yesterday. I think all of Bills Mafia took it as such. A player who broke his leg a season ago. I think there's certainly question whether he'll start the season, perhaps on the PUP list, but when McDermott comes out and says that he's on schedule and mentions training camp as a potential target date, I know that we heard that all off season with Von Miller and how that ended up materializing, but you need Matt Milano in the center of this defense. You saw what him going down really meant for that unit, and with a team that lost or potentially has lost its two veteran safeties, we're still not sure what Micah Hyde's going to do, and I know that was discussed yesterday as well, but a team that has lost two players like that in the back end, you also lose a Tre'Davious White, your linebacking core with Milano and Bernard has to become your top unit this year. It has to become that unit that locks everything down. I know it was trending that way last year before Milano went down with the injury, but if they can get those two going for 15, 16, 17-plus games, I think the sky is the limit for those two, and they can really gain that rapport alongside one another and really wreak havoc on opposing offenses. So, yeah, I think it was a positive update, and to see him out there on the practice field, he's been around one Bills drive for the past several months rehabbing. The one surprise on the injury front was Spencer Brown. I don't know if that had been reported, but it was revealed he had off-season shoulder surgery, but another good sign that he was out there participating in individual drills, didn't participate in team drills, but was out there in uniform and running around. So that's a good sign there, and obviously a good sign with Milano. McDermott going as far as to say that he was on schedule. But yeah, you mentioned the attendance. Certainly a breath of fresh air for the media to be able to cover the players on the field and the wide receiver room and how things, rather than just focusing on one diva wide receiver and his lack of attendance.
They were all there. All the stars of the show that we expected at wide receiver, they were there. That was nice.
Unheard of these days.
Right, Daquan Jones and Rasul Douglas, the only two, and I don't think those absences are even that big of a deal. I think that could even benefit those two position groups. You have a Dwayne Carter, a young player. You have players at the cornerback position, Akai or Elam, trying to make their name and present themselves a new role, a contributing role on this team. So having two veterans maybe not be there for the first week, maybe a couple weeks of OTAs, not a huge deal.
Yeah, and to have adults, right? These are grown men. They've got stuff going on with their families. It's voluntary. Who knows what they were up to, but that's no big deal.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
I'm sure they're not out in Vegas like at the Mirage or whatever, skipping OTAs.
By the way, they're shutting the Mirage down.
No.
I just saw that the other day. I used to go out to the Mirage all the time.
One last go?
I think I'm going to have to do it. Alex, you mentioned Von Miller real quick. McDermott says day to day. Do we think we see Von Miller get closer to the Von Miller pre-injury?
The Bills need him to be the Von Miller, at least something reminiscent of the Von Miller that we saw pre-injury. I'm not so sure because of the production that he was putting out there before that injury. I'm not so sure we'll ever see that version again. But they certainly need him to produce more than the 5 tackles or maybe even less than he had a season ago. I think he only came close, or maybe had 1 sack or whatever it was. I can't even remember the statistics, but certainly not a contributing factor on the defense. With the loss of Leonard Floyd and the sort of transition they're going through and the edge room, and Greg Rousseau coming off the injury troubles that he had last year, A.J. Epineza in a big year, you need Von Miller to step up and really bring something to the table. Not only his leadership and his guidance within that room, but you need him to produce some sacks and some pressures and some quarterback hurries to get this defense going. It's tough to tell at this point. I think we'll see during training camp, but the Bills need him to produce.
Real quick, Andy, to you first. Areas of concern with this Bills team. Immediate, your thoughts after one day of being out there looking at the team.
I wonder a little bit about the safety position and how that's going to go. I know they bring in Cole Bishop, and I know they have Taylor Rapp, and they bring in Mike Edwards. I just wonder how that's all going to play out, given how good and how long the Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer connection had been there. Now, they hadn't been together completely for the last couple of years because of injuries and things like that, and you can say they may have lost a step or not. But I just wonder how that's all going to play out. If those guys are the right guys to make it. Taylor Rapp, I wonder about specifically. Mm-hmm. He's kind of an in the box type of safety. I wonder if that's the same role he's going to have. I just kind of wonder about the depth at that position a little bit.
Alex, same question.
Yeah, certainly. They need Cole Bishop to pick up this defense quickly and at least become a rotational piece, I think, early in the season. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer didn't come off the field very often, but when you have 2 new safeties, relatively new safeties, Rapp was here last year, but he'll be expected to be in a more increased role this season. And then you have Mike Edwards coming off free agency and starting his time with the Bills with an injury. You really need Cole Bishop to come up to speed very quickly. And I think the goal for him is to be a starter by the time the end of the season comes around. How quick that happens, it remains to be seen. I'm not sure we'll see it in week 1. That would obviously be a great thing potentially for the Bills if he's able to prove himself here during the preseason and training camp. But, yeah, I think there's a lot, maybe not a lot, but certainly is a bit to be worried about with that safety room. I know that they've brought in a lot to fill the shoes of Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. I think you just mentioned D. Delaney. We talked about Mike Edwards, Taylor Rapp, the friendly fire king. But, yeah, they need to find some semblance of consistency back there. Rapp did come along in the system as the season progressed last year. I know Mike Edwards has some familiarity in relative systems. So I think it's going to be those 2 out of training camp. But Cole Bishop is really going to be the key, obviously, to unlocking the potential of this safety room. And hopefully by season's end, he can not only be a contributing player on defense, but work his way into the starting lineup. You heard Taron Johnson yesterday talk about his size and speed and the combination of the 2. He's bigger than Taron Johnson. He says he runs like he's my size. So Cole Bishop certainly already eye-popping performance at training camp.
All right, Alex, we close with something we call 3 and Out. It's not really Bills related. It's a little bit lighter. I guess the first question is kind of Bills related. Jordan Poyer saying over the weekend that Josh Allen is the best quarterback. That gets blown up. Poyer has to talk to reporters down at Dolphins OTA and talk up Tua. But, I mean, Poyer's been around Josh Allen for the bulk of his career. I think that too much was made of him referring to his former quarterback as the best rather than Tua.
Yeah, I certainly think too much is made of it, but it is to be expected when an opposing player now says that about a rival, a divisional rival quarterback. But when you've spent so much time with the player and you've developed that rapport and you've been saying it year after year, and with Jordan Poyer, one thing I think Andy and we've all gotten it, he's an honest guy. He's going to speak his mind. He's not really somebody to mince words and he's not really worried about the repercussions. He's an honest talker, and I think that's what you saw in that moment. And I don't think he'd have any trouble going up to Tua in that locker room and confirming his words to Tua. And quite honestly, it's not like he has Patrick Mahomes in his locker room. Okay, Tua, okay, he's come along these past couple of years, but to compare Tua to Josh Allen, I don't think you're on the same wavelength there. So it's not like he's comparing apples to apples. He's comparing apples to oranges when it comes to Josh Allen and Tua Tagovailoa.
And to be fair, it's red meat for a bunch of Bills fans at a charity softball game, right? Where it's, hey, I'm back, and I didn't get to say goodbye, so here's my goodbye. And yeah,
and for all those in the football media who were there, it gives them something kind of football related to cover and something to get some clicks for. So that always helps the business.
Some news coming out of the league meetings I saw online that an optical tracking system for line to gain is something they're going to test out during the preseason, and if it goes well, move it to the regular season, but still keep the chain gang out there for coaches and players and fans to know what's going on. I think this is going to work out just fine. I think a lot of people are craving for it. It's like the strike zone in baseball and tennis, where the ball is it in or out.
If the chain gang eventually goes away, we're going to miss out on those highlights of these old guys getting absolutely obliterated on the sidelines, right, and blowing out their knees. It just makes sense. Whatever. I mean, eventually the ball will have GPS in it, and you'll figure out the yardage that way. It is what it is.
There's already a chip in it, Alex.
Right.
Yeah, I think you said it. The one thing I'm going to miss is just the old men from the sideline just hustling and bustling onto the field, and sometimes when the chain links get tangled up, it creates a bit of a delay, and it seems like we're playing 1920s football. But can you imagine being one of those chain gang members if you're on the sideline and they have the optical thing and that's really what they're going by? You're like to bring up a Seinfeld reference, it's like when Kramer opens his briefcase and all that's in there are crackers. That's what these guys are going to be doing on the sideline. They're going to be there for basically no reason. I can't imagine waking up and thinking, oh, I'm going to the stadium to really play no role in the proceedings. But hey, they're getting paid for it, so I'm sure they're not complaining.
Yeah, they're figured in. So we're gonna grandfather you in and just let you keep your job, even though you're not doing anything.
Hey, Kramer was taking care of business at Brant Leland. He had a job to do. We usually end with what you're watching right now aside from football. I mean, locked into the PGA Championship all last weekend for me, but my wife says she's heard big things about this new show on Netflix called Baby Reindeer. We gave it a whirl.
God.
It's insane.
I couldn't get through the first episode. I couldn't follow it. Now, it was later on in the evening, watching golf, maybe had a few beers with dinner, but is it worth me giving it another try? Alex, you seem to have seen it already.
If you're into something that's going to make you feel incredibly uncomfortable, but at the same time keep you on the edge of your seat,
all right,
this is for you, because I felt simultaneously uncomfortable as hell, but interested and intrigued in what was going to come next at all times throughout this show. I mean, it just has everything. This woman is stalking this man. It has scandal that goes beyond that. I don't want to get too far into it and say something that I'll regret, because there's so much like I said, scandal throughout the show, and it's based on a true story, and the guy who is the main character is actually playing himself. So this is a story that he lived out, and there's a lot of tragedy in it as well. And for him to play himself, I believe that's correct.
I'll give it another whirl. You sold me on it.
I just blacked out because I have no idea what you two are talking about.
Look it up on Netflix.
All right, Baby Reindeer on Netflix, and the other one, you have to check out the Ashley Madison documentary when when everybody who was cheating on their spouses, all their information got leaked. That's certainly a wild ride as well.
That came out in the suggested for me category today. So
Uh-oh.
I better hide that one from your wife, Kevin.
Hi, Claire.
we're just kidding, Claire. You, Andy, anything?
I got to be honest with you guys, other than like a little bit of sports, NBA, NHL playoffs, I haven't been watching much TV lately. I've been working on the yard, playing some golf.
I thought you were just going to say the yacht for a second.
Well, no, I'm not Terry Pagula.
Wow, they're really paying well over there at Spectrum News 1.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm cleaning Terry Pagula's yacht. That's my side hustle. But coaching my kid in soccer. So I honestly haven't been watching much TV the last few weeks. But now I'm gonna have to watch Baby Reindeer.
Give it a
Yes,
whirl,
you have
Andy.
to.
We both say give it a whirl. I'm going to go back to it. Alex, why don't you give us a little info on what you have coming up? Some plugs, as you may say, on what's going on with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Here at the Batavia Daily News and Livingston County News, kind of a dual newspaper situation for our company. We cover 30 high school sports teams throughout what we call the Glow region, Genesee, Livingston, Orleans, and Wyoming counties. It's sectional season, so if you're from that area, I know that that's really a big ticket item from where we're from. We're really knee deep into that, but also Bills coverage. You can follow it all at thedailyNewsOnline.com. Put out an OTA takeaway story yesterday that did pretty well, so a lot of information in there. And we also have a new podcast that's out right here, right now, live Buffalo Football Talk with my co-host AJ Sobolski. Latest episode was recorded last night, so make sure you dive into that. And then Bills Digest, we came out with a post-draft issue, and next up is our pre-training camp issue. You can find that at billsdigest.com.
Busy guy. I love it.
No, right?
Yeah.
Here I am, just going home and going to bed every day.
Well, hey, I'm not up and at 'em at 3 a.m. That's usually when I'm going to bed. So
Yeah, great job plugging your stuff. You're doing great work, and love watching your podcast. I think you guys are doing a good job with that, and obviously reading your stuff online, high school sports, Bills coverage, all good stuff, man.
And before we go, for those of you out there, remember this. I'm taking part in the 11-day power play, raising money for cancer charities in Western New York. Andy has said if you go up to him while he's watching my game at the 11-day power play and trash me, Andy will donate $5 for each person.
Yeah, if you heckle Kevin Carroll during his 11-day power play while I'm there, I will donate $5 for each person that does that.
All right.
big spender from the Yacht Man.
Yeah.
Well, right. I can only do so much here, right?
All right.
Hey, before we go, make sure you like, subscribe, comment on our stuff on YouTube, on Facebook. You can watch us on Spotify, Google. You can listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple, all the places you get your podcasts. We are there for you every single week.
Alex, anything else to add?
That's it. Should be an exciting summer. Excited to see Andy out there a little bit more and more. I know that we've seen him over the past couple of years, but back on the beat.
That's right. Back to my soul sports roots. I'm loving
Andy
it.
on the beat, and everyone but me will be back at another round of Bills OTAs.
You'll be asleep.
Yeah, coming up next Tuesday, and then back here with another Buffalo End Zone podcast coming up next Wednesday. As always, everyone, thanks for joining us.